I'm Keith Halliday. Welcome to Yukonomist, the Yukon's most watched and only economics chat show. We have three sections on the show for you today. Business and Economics, which is about business and economics. Then our Public Policy section, which is about public policy. And finally, Living the Dream, which is about some Yukoner who's found an interesting path in life that we'll share for you at the end of the show. For our first guest today, I'm really excited to have the President and CEO of Air North, Joe Sparling, with us. Joe, thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
You know, maybe I should call you the President and CEO of Epic Airlines. I loved your April Fool's joke about the complete with the ad on the internet that's had 5,000 views and the press release and everything. Now, that's not the kind of thing that a typical stodgy airline would do. How does that play into your marketing strategy and how Air North's positioned with the consumer?
Well, firstly, it was a surprise to me too. So I guess I'm the stodgy guy because I didn't think of it and I didn't even know about it. But certainly getting lots of comments about it, and you know, some people took it seriously. We had some shareholders that were quite annoyed that we were going to drop the Yukon affiliation in our name, and until we got them settled down when we pointed out it was an April Fool's joke and all that sort of thing. But you know, a lot of people did see it, and I think it's generated a little bit of attention, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
And you know, I think the marketing department had fun with it, and that's what April Fool's is supposed to be all about.
Now, I've noticed that the Air North marketing department is really active and quite dynamic. And unlike a lot of bigger airlines, which are kind of loathed by their customers and that we put up with because we have to get from A to B, Yukoners seem to have made a connection with Air North. Was that part of your strategy from the beginning, or has that grown up over time?
Well, I think when we got into the jet business, it absolutely was part of our strategy because we knew that you know, if we were going to compete with the largest airline and now the largest two airlines in the country, that local market support was absolutely essential. We had to. We felt we could deliver a product that was going to be very well received by our local market, and you know, really since we've started our local market, a significant proportion of them have become shareholders. So I think that that just adds to the local support element.
Yeah. Now, Air North has a lot going for it. Just mentioning the Nanaimo bars and a few other things come to mind. But as an economist, I think that your in-flight magazine has these great letters that often give a great amount of detail about the business and the economics of flying compared to the bump in your typical in-flight magazine. And I think your most recent one had really interesting information about the tourism business and Air North's role in that. And I think you said that, you know, 50% of your traffic, and I think it was in the summer, is now visitors. And so tell us a little bit more. Why did you write that letter, and what messages are you trying to get out to the Yukon population? Well,
I think the message I was really trying to get out was that as the company's grown, I think as I previously mentioned, you know, we rely on local market support, but local market support is no longer enough. We really have to rely on a combination of local market support and visitor traffic. And people from outside the Yukon are becoming an increasingly important part of our business. You know, using the Ottawa route as an example, I don't think there's enough Yukoners that fly back and forth between Whitehorse and Ottawa to make the route a success. We really have to develop some business from people that don't live in the Yukon, most notably people in Ontario and people in Yellowknife, for that matter. It's really going to take a combination of markets to make that route stand on its own.
Now, you made some interesting points in that letter about how we think about tourism in the Yukon. We have a lot of government statistics about border crossings and how many people fly in and how much they spend in Whitehorse, but those numbers generally don't include what they spent to get here. And you had some statistics based on your research that showed that if you spend $100 on airfare on an outside airline, $9 or $10 of it stays in the Yukon. If you spend $100 on Air North, it's more like $80 or $90. How did you get those numbers? And I think do you find do government officials, are they surprised by that?
Well, firstly, the numbers are admittedly very crude. They're based on employment comparators, but it is a recognized statistic, the number of full-time employees per 100 departures, and we've at least 10-to-1 ratio over the mainline competitors. I think the last time I measured it was more like 13-to-1. So, in terms of benefit to our local economy, if you buy your product from the airline that employs 260 people here, obviously more money is going to flow into the economy than if you buy your product from the airline that employs 20 people here. That's just a little bit of a no-brainer. Now, in terms of the reaction to those statistics, this is probably the only jurisdiction in all of Canada where it really matters how they get here, because if you consider any of the provinces, BC, Alberta, does it really matter whether people travel to BC, and I'm talking about domestic travelers, on Air Canada or WestJet? I mean, both airlines have an equal number of employees in all of the provinces. Their workforces are distributed, pretty well all across the country. The Yukon is quite different. We have our own airline here. There's certainly not another community of 36 or 30,000 people in the whole country that has its own airline, and I think that the economic impact of that is huge, and I think it's sometimes under recognized.
Let's talk for a minute about your new routes, because you've been adding some new locations lately: Kelowna, Yellowknife, Ottawa. How do you think about it when you open a new route? There must take a time period before the ridership ramps up to make it profitable. How do you manage that risk, and how do you think about whether to shut down a losing route or to further expand a winning one?
Well, we started our jet service with the intention of one gateway. Vancouver, was the only gateway at the time, and we soon in the planning process felt that there was a case for an Alberta gateway as well, because those of us that have lived here long enough remember that Edmonton actually used to be the primary gateway to the Yukon, and then it transitioned to Vancouver. But in any case, we started off thinking about Vancouver only. We very quickly got to thinking that Alberta would be an alternative gateway, and we did an informal survey, I think, through the Chamber of Commerce, trying to decide whether to go to Edmonton or Calgary, and we couldn't decide. Both airports were keen on having direct service, but not if they didn't want us to go to the other airport. There was quite a competition between Edmonton and Calgary, and they had some marketing incentive money that they were going to hold back if we went to the other city. So, we did a survey, and the numbers came up just as close to 50-50 as you could get. And since we've started flying there, the numbers have been awfully close to 50-50. So, that decision was based upon a survey. Our decision to go to Kelowna, we felt that we needed to. We're competing with network carriers. We don't have a broad network, so we felt that we needed to find strategic ways to get people onto our airplanes that are not originating just in our traditional gateway cities. Kelowna seemed to be one that was of interest to Yukoners, and we didn't feel it was a huge risk because it was we combined it with an existing flight to Vancouver, and it certainly almost from the get-go proved to be very popular, and I think that that one was a great choice. Ottawa was another one that we looked at because there's an awful lot of Yukoners that have friends and relatives back east, and there's an awful lot of business travel that originates back east that comes to the Yukon. We think Ottawa has potential to be a real winner for us as well. We haven't been in the market long enough to prove that up. We knew it wasn't going to be a winner overnight, but we're going to give it every chance to be successful. And when you ask how we arrive at those decisions, I mean, there's a certain amount of market research, but a lot of it is anecdotal. We look at where our transfer bags go. We look at talk to customers, and you really just make the best decision that you can.
Well, good luck on that Ottawa route. It's also nice to give those people another opportunity to get out of that city.
Sure.
Let's wrap up with a question about the main Whitehorse-Vancouver route. Now, there's a lot of capacity, a lot of competition on that route. And one of your earlier CEO letters in the In-Flight magazine talked about the low prices and how sustainable that was for the three airlines involved. What are your perspectives now that we're in, April 2014 on that market situation?
Well, the issue is not The issue was the combination of pricing and load factor, and the current combination is not sustainable. The pricing itself is sustainable if the load factors improve. So that leads to the conclusion that's really a capacity problem. There's too many empty seats flying around, and that's not only a waste of gas, but it's not productive. Eventually, somebody's going to have to redeploy some capacity in that market. We're doing our best to make sure that it's not us. We want one of the other guys to do it. Number one, because we don't. Our goal is to stay right here and be a Yukon carrier. We don't want to spread our wings to flying in other parts of Canada. I think the other guys have got all kinds of different routes that they could apply, that they could put at least some of their capacity on. We feel we've got. It's much like a power grid, and what you've got in the Yukon right now is you've got two power grids, and I think intuitively. Almost anybody can imagine that running two power grids is not very efficient, because so many of the costs associated with a grid are fixed, and the more users you have on the grid, the more efficient it is for everybody. Airplanes are mobile assets, but the cost of running a route is really largely fixed. We've got a schedule in there, and whether there's one person on the airplane or it's a full airplane, it costs us pretty much the same to fly every flight. And if you're going to have a scheduled pattern, you've got to have a certain minimum frequency level, or people just aren't going to find you terribly convenient to use. So, in essence, we look at our route network as one where most of the costs are fixed, because we're flying the flights, and now we need to make sure we get an acceptable load factor that will support the pricing structure that's out there, and that's the market dynamic that's out of whack right now. And so again, we get great support from Yukoners. We need to get more visitors on our flights, and we need to drive more visitors to use the local infrastructure. And when I say visitors, it could be travelers from the mining sector, travelers from the tourism sector, but all of those components will ultimately make for a more convenient and affordable air transportation network for Yukoners.
Yep. Well, it's a fascinating business, Joe, and it'll be interesting to see how Yukoners respond to that message. And we're all wishing you luck and looking to see how the air business turns out. Thanks a lot for coming in today.
Thank you. Thanks, Keith.
Welcome back to Yukonomist in our public policy segment. On this part of the show, we're delighted to have out from behind our usual cameras Chris McNutt, who is the high muckety-muck of Northwestel Community Television. Chris, thanks for being on the show.
My pleasure, Keith.
And thanks for inflicting me on the viewing audience. I love this thing.
I'm just doing my job to bring the community to the people through the television medium.
So tell us about your job and this whole idea of community television. I mean, this show, as much as the viewers may be surprised, is not bringing in $1 million of advertising money for the channel. How is it funded? Why does it exist? What's the story of community television?
It began 30 or 40 years ago in the 70s when cable TV came out. And cable, as opposed to a television station, is really a distribution medium. It's a way to take TV channels that somebody else creates and really bring them into the home. So the people that are doing that, and now we also have satellite as well, they're making money by redistributing TV content. But TV content is very expensive to make, so the CRTC has said, you that is making a profit from selling people TV content also have to pay to help it be created. So the rules of anybody who has a license to distribute cable or satellite in Canada, they must reinvest a certain amount of their gross revenue into the creation of television. Or in the case of cable companies, you could take the same money you would invest in the national media funds and run a local non-profit, non-commercial community channel.
So now if we were interviewing, if this was a panel with Anne Rand, I'm sure she would be arguing that that money should be either given back to shareholders to fatten their bank accounts, or result in lower prices for the people who are paying the cable bills. So make the argument for community television to exist.
Well, it's non-commercial, so you can have shows like the one we're watching right now, and we don't have to worry about ratings. We don't need to worry about how much dish soap is being sold. It gives people a voice. And in its origin, if you wanted to communicate with your fellow neighbors, humans, using video, there was very few choices. Say if we go back in time, the 1970s, even the 80s, there was no internet, there was no YouTube. People didn't have video cameras in their pockets. So the game has shifted a little bit, but it is still a place where people can express themselves, share films, share content and you don't have to worry about it being commercially successful like the rest of the TV industry, because it is a business and it's a big business.
Do you think that our viewer numbers for this show, I think we've hit double digits on the YouTube downloads now. Do you think that would be not enough to fund a mainstream show?
We'd have to do some arguing. I'd say the scope of it is rather slim, but we have a passionate viewing audience here in Whitehorse because it's Whitehorse Topics. Most TV in Canada is made in Toronto. For French TV, it's made in Montreal and Quebec. So what's being lost all over Canada is regional television, where if you went back in time 20 years, your local stations in Thunder Bay and Saskatoon and Red Deer and Prince George still did a significant amount of their own programming, or they created their own content, be it morning shows or the evening news. And that's all being lost now. So the CRTC is concerned about that, and they are supporting community television because they see it as a means for still to have that local expression, or else you're watching Toronto and Montreal and Vancouver all across the country.
Yeah, now you mentioned the internet there. Mainstream broadcasters, of course, are struggling with how to compete with the internet. Netflix, illegal downloading, some of the big three US channels have been bleeding market share to other players for a long time. And it's interesting to see that community television also has some competitors now. Anybody with an iPhone can put something on their Mac and put it on YouTube. And so how do you as a community channel compete with Yukoners have a choice to watch the community channel or go on YouTube and watch Pet Tricks or whatever the flavor of the day is. So how do you feel about that? How are you doing competing with YouTube?
Well, it's hard I don't really think of ourselves as competing with the world, because in a sense you are, but we're just doing what we can to create some compelling local content and seeing what the result is. And we've been successful with some of the shows. So it's just a question of everything has an audience, so it doesn't matter if you're putting a cat video on YouTube, your audience is worldwide people who, like cats. So, and a lot of audiences are small. So we're just saying, okay, we're going to create content that is, that people in the North are interested in, because we also operate a community channel in Yellowknife as well. And sometimes we share content back and forth. And yeah, I'm not really concerned, but as far as distribution, we do put most of the content we create online as well. So you have the viewing choice. You can watch it in linear fashion on cable TV, or you can go onto YouTube and watch it that way as well. So we're also trying to give the viewers choices how they consume what we do.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that too, because of course your ad for Whitehorse City Council famously went viral across the country. I don't know how many hits it got, but far more people than live in the Yukon or definitely have ever been to a city council meeting. So it's a new opportunity for you guys too to get your message and your content out there.
It's exciting. It is that we can go anywhere with what we do, and that was of great interest to it. Another show, we were doing another season called Garage Sale Scavenger Hunt, where I sent that out to my family, and my sisters, who lives in southern BC, her friends at work became fans of the show as well. So it's through network, you never know what's going to happen.
Yep, that's fantastic. It's a great story. Let's wrap up with a game of our famous buy, sell, and hold, which the viewer has reported is one of the favorite parts of the show.
Yeah.
So let's put you through the paces, Chris. So first of all, buy, sell, or hold on the community channel, live sports.
I'd say hold, and maybe even sell. I think it's a question of trying to get audience. So I think that, and we don't do much live of anything, because whoever it's, be it sports or theater or music performance, you're trying to get audience and trying to get people to pay. So, and most people kind of prefer that.
Yeah, I was wondering that because I was at the Arctic Winter Games in Fairbanks, and some of those games, maybe not even live but taped, I thought were quite good entertainment. So I wondered what you thought about that.
Well, we tape them, and we do live sports. We tape them and play them the next week, but we don't do it live.
Okay, number 2, buy, sell, or hold community television on your iPhone.
Oh, that's a buy. That's the new screen. We live in the multi-screen universe now. So as being a content provider, it's giving it to the consumers and watch it as you are most comfortable.
Okay, and let's wrap up with number 3, buy, sell, or hold Between Two Ferns, the mock community television interview show by Zach Galifianakis.
Oh, that's buy. That's big buy. That's brilliant. That's brilliant. He's a talented man, Zach is. And maybe we should get a couple of ferns for the Yukonomist. And,
I think that's a good idea.
Coming next, ferns on the Yukonomist. We'll have to get some budget. We'll need a grant.
That's super. Thanks very much for coming on the show, Chris.
You're very
Good to
welcome,
see you.
Keith. Yes, my pleasure.
Welcome back. Our next segment is Living the Dream, and we've got Sabine Schweiger with us here, Yukonomist's Norwegian correspondent. Sabine just spent a year living in Trondheim, Norway. Welcome, Sabine.
Thank you, Keith.
It's good to have you back in the territory.
Thank you.
So tell us about Trondheim, this Norwegian city where you spent quite a bit of time. How far north is it? How big is it? Etc.
Okay, it's about the same latitude as Dawson, maybe just slightly south of Dawson, which really surprised us. I didn't believe that we were moving quite that far north. And it's around 180,000 people, but in about the same footprint as Whitehorse. So more density, more amenities and that sort of thing. It has a really, really old downtown core that's really cute, has those beautiful old wooden houses that are colored in every different Norwegian and Scandinavian color, big pedestrian malls downtown that are outdoors, and sort of that classic Scandinavian tastefulness to the buildings.
So that's about 5 times more people than Whitehorse has in the same footprint. So more people living in apartments and more sort of towers and smaller houses, or?
Yeah, definitely smaller houses. Most people live in a house, believe it or not. But our property that we were renting on, it was probably a little bit smaller than our urban lot here in Whitehorse, but there were 4 families living on it. We were living in a self-contained apartment above the garage, and then there were 3 families living in the other part of the house, and we had about 600 square feet.
Interesting. So I wanted to ask you to compare and contrast life in Trondheim versus life in Whitehorse. So let's start first with, where the Yukon has it sorted out, where we have some advantages over life in Trondheim. What would those sort of topics be?
Well, I definitely think it's hard to say because I didn't speak Norwegian, so a sense of community, maybe I would have gotten that more if I would have lived there longer. But here we just have an amazing sense of community. If you have any interest in anything, you can find a group of people to do it with. We've got an incredible arts community, lots of really talented people, and I didn't find that so much there. And as I said, maybe I don't speak the language, so I couldn't find those opportunities. I would also say that our skiing the ski chalet Mount Mac is by far better than anything they have in Trondheim. Although the skiing is much more prevalent there, we would go out for a 2-hour ski and there would be literally 300 people that would pass us or we would be passed by while we were out skiing for that 2-hour ski. So that's definitely a big difference.
Yeah, I know you're a connoisseur of ski trails, so that's really impressive to hear. I mean, I love Mount Mac, but to hear you compare it favorably to Norway. Take that, Norwegians.
Yeah, well, we definitely groom them much more frequently. We have a ski chalet. There were no ski chalets there. Where we were. People would just arrive, strap their skis on, and head off skiing. So a slightly different kind of culture.
And what was better about living in Norway or Trondheim?
Well, what really, really impressed me was the activity levels in Trondheim, in Norway in particular. Everywhere you go, there are people roller skiing, running, cycling, walking, and they're not doing it just for recreational purposes, they're also doing it as a modes of transportation. You see that 80-year-old lady with her kick sled going down to the grocery store to get her groceries in the winter. So there's much more of a culture of activity and healthy living, I think, in Norway than there is here.
Interesting. Now, one thing about Norway is they have a huge oil and gas industry that's been going for a couple decades, and the Norwegian National Fund that gets the profits from that now is over 1 million crowns for each Norwegian. They're each millionaires in crown terms. How do they think about the oil and gas business there as part of their economy and funding so much of their government? You know, we here are talking about fracking and the future of natural gas in the Yukon. The Norwegians, that was something they had 30 years ago. How do they feel about how that's turned out?
I think most Norwegians would think it's fairly favorable because they've had very strong policies in terms of being very conservative with how they spend that money. So they really have this great nest egg from the revenues from that fund a lot of their social programs. They're very rich with universities and daycares and social programs, sporting activities and things for children are free over there, versus here you have to pay significantly for them. So I think those sorts of things the Norwegians probably really appreciate, and they're a very rich culture.
Yeah, they have done a much better job than Alberta or even Alaska in saving the profits from their oil business and building up a fund with it.
Yeah.
Well, this is a business and economics show, so let's wrap up with a game of buy, sell, or hold. We have 3 images on the Yukonomist iPad related to Norway. I'm going to show them to you, and you'll tell me if they were a stock on the stock market, if you would buy them, sell them, or if you're neutral, hold them.
Okay.
Are you ready, Sabina?
I certainly am.
Okay, image number 1, the Norwegian curling team's fashion choices.
Oh, I think I would sell on that one. A little too racy for me.
You haven't bought these pants for your husband or son?
No, I haven't.
Maybe on your next trip. Number 2, buy, sell, or hold Norway's crown prince, Prince Haakon.
Oh, I probably would buy. Yeah, he's very well liked in Norway.
Do you think Canada should get its own royal family?
I'm neutral on that. I'd hold on that one.
Okay, and third, and I'm sure you saw this coming, buy, sell, or hold the internet sensation. What did the Fox say by those Norwegian singers?
I guess I would buy on that one. It's been a huge sensation around the world.
All right, Sabina, thanks very much for coming in. Fascinating to hear about Norway, and I look forward to hearing about your next trip as well.
Oh, thank you very much for having
Thank
me.
you.
Thank you, Keith. Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to Yukonomist. That wraps up this week's show. Look forward to seeing you next time.